I took 6 years to get 2 undergraduate degrees. I was at the end of my first one, majoring in physics and mathematics. And I had enrolled in a master's in physics program, somewhat unenthusiastically, because my way wasn't clear to me. What was I going to do with this master's? I was in a materials physics class at the time, and the topic turned to semiconductors. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. Look at this material that behaves in this funny, odd way, under different conditions. And yet, this is the material that is given us computers and all the electronics in the world. And I thought, well, I really need to know more about this material. I didn't just pick up a textbook. I decided to enroll in another undergraduate engineering program. And all I can say is that, to me, being innovative has always meant doing what I really wanted to do. If I was enthusiastically doing something, then creativity and innovation came naturally. I was at the end of my engineering undergraduate program, and my project I picked was to do automatic wire placement, using software. What this meant is there's a whole bunch of wires that needed to get from one point to another, and they couldn't cross each other. And I had to do this with software. So this meant learning to program well and algorithms. Algorithms are really puzzles, They're puzzles that solve real problems in the real world. And I thought, okay, I'm graduating next month. I'm going to take a software job. And I really didn't know a lot of programming then. I had done this only one big, undergrad project. So they gave me a customer service job. Think about this company. They took the most junior person who barely knew how to program and put them in front of their most valuable, assets, the customers. But a year later, I was pretty good at my job by then, and the sales guy in Calcutta, I was in Bangalore, based in Bangalore, said, can you come out and meet this potential customer? He really wants to talk to somebody, who can speak more of the language than the sales guys could. So I said, sure. I like to travel, and I went to Calcutta, met this guy who was the owner of a glass bottle factory, okay? And remember, this was 1984 in India, and he was revolutionary in his thinking. He locked eyes with me because I seemed to understand more than the sales guy. And he said, I want software delivered with the hardware that this guy's going to sell me that's going to automatically design my glass bottles, given the volume and the maximum height and all the other parameters that went into making the color of the glass, etc. And he said, then I want the software to automatically drive the machine and the manufacturing process. So there was no human intervention in this. And I thought, wow, this is great. And the software guy had coached me to say that we could deliver any software he wanted. So I looked at him and said, yeah, software can do that, definitely, no problem. Back in the hotel that night, I thought to myself, well, this guy is a visionary, right? He has this fantastic idea. We had sort of walked through some of the back slums of Calcutta to get to his factory. But he wanted this fantastic software to go with his, the mini computer the sales guy was going to sell him. And I said, there must be a way to do this, but I can personally not do this. I don't have the tools to do this. I had no computer science formal training. Then I told myself, well, I have to go get the tools. So you sort of see the pattern here developing, right? So in 1985, I was in the US getting a master's in computer science. And I took a job after that in a Silicon Valley company, pretty standard, software company. I was having a reasonably good time there. But, those two people over there in the corner who were in front of a whiteboard all day, writing equations and arguing with each other, but they seemed to be having the most fun. So pretty bold, I went up to them and I said, hey, I'm so-and-so. And what do you guys do here? I see you writing interesting stuff on the board, and you don't seem to be actually ever in front of a computer. You're arguing with each other all day. So it turned out that these two people were physics PhDs arguing about simulation models for transistors and semiconductors. So I said, well, it looks like someone with a PhD has the most fun in the company. So I want that job. So I enrolled in not in a physics PhD, because I really had left physics behind a while ago, in a computer science PhD. So I graduated with a PhD, with a doctorate at the age of 35, had my first child then, and I went on to work for a Silicon Valley company. And it was definitely one of the best jobs I've had. And this company was an innovative company, and they were very prolific in filing patents, hence the 43 or so patents on which I'm either sole or co-inventor. Not all of these are entirely my ideas. And this life went on, and I was 42, had my second child, and in my 50s, I decided to do a startup. So I have a co-founder, Kathy Faust. So she and I decided that we had this brilliant idea, and we were going to do a startup in our 50s. So I'm from the Valley, where most of the startups happen, right? But neither of us fit the typical demographic of a startup founder, right? Women in our 50s, we didn't look like 22-year-old males from Stanford. Sorry, that image didn't work. So what we did is we basically raised our seed money, almost $1 million, from 2 National Science Foundation grants. That was a way to go, because we would not be able to raise money the traditional way. And we thought we just had this brilliant idea, right? So, first lesson here, especially for all you young people in the audience, is ignore your age. Just go do stuff when you want to do it. Whatever motivates you at whatever age, just go do it. Because it's that kind of following what sparks that interest in you makes you most creative, makes you most innovative, I think. And the second lesson is really to ignore naysayers. Unfortunately, most of the naysayers are usually your close friends and family. And so they are being really kind when they tell you, really, you really want to go get a second undergraduate degree? You couldn't just read this from a textbook and go get a job like the rest of us, good friends. Or, starting a PhD program at the age of 30. Leaving a Silicon Valley job that paid $37,000 in 1989, which is a really good salary, for 5 years of slogging out as a grad student on maybe $10,000 a year, assistantship program. So it doesn't matter. And a shout out to my parents. My father's passed away, and my husband, who've always been supportive of every crazy idea I've had, and have encouraged me to do that. I think that's really important to have support in your family. Now, the startup. Let's talk a little bit about the startup, because this is what's driving me and my co-founder today. The idea came to me in a slightly different way than it did my co-founder, so I'm going to tell my stories. I'm the one on stage. Driving around in the Bay Area, I know traffic can be pretty bad in the car, and I'm reading news all the time when I'm not in the car. And I was frustrated that in the car, I couldn't really turn on the radio and got to hear the news I wanted. This was some years ago, before we had this million and plus apps in the App Store, where now you have radio stations, podcasts, and all kinds of stuff, right? So how was I going to be able to get access to any information I wanted in the car, like a radio station, with the information that I was interested in? That's the problem that I had, and I wanted to be able to solve this problem. Now, the problem is actually quite difficult in some sense, because I am interested, say, in politics and gardening. So I want a radio station for gardening, and I want a radio station for politics. And my friend over there is interested in stock market and surfing, right? So she wants a radio station for stock market and one for surfing. Now, how do you go about solving a problem like this? I think, innovation can often come as a eureka moment, but I think more often it comes as an assembly of smaller ideas that together, create something fantastic that one can use. Now, here's one problem, right? The internet is mostly written information. How do you go from written information to audible information? You do, machine synthesis of speech. And the technology here is improving. It's not perfect. Prosody, getting emotional content into synthesized speech is just beginning. And this is what we use. We are using a lot of machine synthesized voice in order to generate the correct information into the correct audio form. But this isn't really even the crux of the problem. The crux of the problem is this. If I were to search on the internet today using the word, say, stock market, I get 107 million hits, from one of your standard search engines. And then what do you do with that? You can't really build a radio station based on instant search, right? So what we actually have to do, and what we are doing, is week after week, month after month, year after year even, we are looking at sources of information across newspapers, magazines, podcasts, bloggers, to understand what are the topics that are typically carried from that source of information. Now, I've got thousands of these sources classified into thousands of topics. And there's a probability function associated with, hey, this is the New York Times gardening, source feed. So this mostly carries gardening, but it could have some information about climate change and other things. I don't know. So I have this box with this loads of information like this. So now you come to me and you say, tell me about surfing. I pull out all the sources that seem to have the highest probability for surfing, and I create a radio station for her based on that. And I go to my technology and say, I really want to know what's happening in the world of vegetable gardening. And so I pull out all the sources that match that topic. And this is how we can create, radio stations now through smartphone apps in this way. And this idea is empowering, and it takes computer science to actually implement this. But its usefulness is undoubted, because it's not just the drivers in the car that benefit from this, but the blind, the vision impaired, the sick, any number of such people who would benefit from hearing stuff rather than reading stuff. Or even I, at the end of a day, when I've been in front of a computer all day, my eyes are tired, right? So I am showing some signs of my age. And what I would really like to do is lie back and listen to my gardening feed, maybe. Or I'm catching up on my politics. Thank you.